Welcome back to News 5. The British Parliament will vote again today on whether to leave the European Union without an agreement. On Tuesday, lawmakers handed Prime Minister Theresa May a second defeat on the Brexit plan she agreed with the EU. Britain is due to exit the bloc on 29th March, and the political turmoil now means the country faces a range of scenarios. Britain could either leave without a deal, they could also delay the 29 March divorce date, or Britain could hold another referendum.
I think it's likely that MPs will reject the idea of a no-deal Brexit. What the free vote does is really avoid for Theresa May a raft of ministerial resignations and resignations from her cabinet. If the government had whipped in either direction, that is, tried to instruct their own MPs to either back a no-deal Brexit or reject the idea of a no-deal Brexit, then several ministers on either side could have felt that they needed to resign from government. There is a genuine chance of a sequel, Meaningful Vote 3. It sounds like the kind of film you would not go and watch at the cinema, but there is a genuine chance that Theresa May brings her deal back to Parliament one more time, perhaps even twice more, to try and get it through right at the last minute. For many of her Brexiteer MPs, what she will say is, look, the threat of an extension, a delay to Brexit, that might mean that in the end Brexit never happens at all. So if you don't back my deal, then you won't get any Brexit at all.
In other world news tonight, the black boxes from the Ethiopian Airlines plane that crashed on Sunday could be sent to a European country for analysis. The boss of the airlines told CNN the reason is proximity and speed. Flight ET302 crashed just minutes after takeoff, killing all 157 people on board. The crash has resulted in a wave of government suspensions over Boeing 737 MAX planes. Disgraced Australian Cardinal George Pell has been sentenced to 6 years in prison for the sexual abuse of two choir boys in 1996 and 1997. A judge called the former top Vatican man arrogant in his attacks that took advantage of his position of authority. It is a drastic fall from grace for the 77-year-old who had once managed church finances and helped elect two popes. Pell is the most senior member of the clergy to be convicted of historical child sex abuse. And the fallout from a sex scandal in the K-pop business continues. Singer-songwriter Jung Jun-young has quit the industry. The 30-year-old is believed to have secretly filmed and shared sexual imagery without his partner's consent. Videos were also shared with fellow entertainers in a chat room. His move comes just days after Seungri, a member of one of Korea's biggest boy bands, Big Bang, announced his retirement from the industry. The 28-year-old has been charged with supplying prostitutes to potential business investors. And in our top story tonight, it is the third consecutive time economists surveyed by the central bank have downgraded economic growth rates going back to June last year. The Monetary Authority of Singapore survey respondents expect GDP growth to come in at 2.5%, slightly down from the 2.6% in the last survey in December. But even with continuing fears of trade protectionism and a Chinese economic slowdown, experts say it's not all doom and gloom.
The numbers make for somber reading. Besides forecasting weaker than expected year-on-year growth in the fourth quarter, Singapore's economy expanded by 1.9% in the fourth quarter of 2018, down from the earlier forecast of 2.4%. The year-on-year growth in the first quarter this year will remain at 1.9%. The 23 private sector economists in the survey also shaved full-year growth from 2.6% to 2.5%, with falls across various sectors. The manufacturing sector is expected to expand at a slower pace, with a growth of 2% as compared to 3% in December. Meanwhile, finance and insurance is expected to post a 4.5% growth, down from the 5.4% forecast last quarter. The construction sector is the only sector where the forecast was raised because of what experts said is expected strong domestic demand.
I think there are a few external factors that are still, concerns for the professional forecaster. I think first and foremost, it will be, the trade tensions between the US and China. and then followed by higher interest rate coming from the US, hiking interest rate, especially for last year. This has been a major concern, and then the third factor would be a slowdown in China.
But economists aren't too concerned. While the range has been downgraded too, as respondents assign equal probabilities for the GDP forecast to the ranges of 2% to 2.4% and 2.5 to 2.9%, and 2.5 still falls comfortably in that range.
Now, if growth starts to slow down itself, obviously income growth also slow down. Perhaps our ability and our willingness to spend more also becomes to be a bit more curtailed as we worry about whether we still have a job or whether labor market condition is looking to soften at this juncture itself. So one thing which we had been more worried about had been interest rate continuing to climb into 2019. So that looks less likely now because growth is starting to slow down by more than expected.
Meanwhile, the forecast for other economic indicators had inflation coming in at between 1.1 and 1.7%, down from 1.3 and 1.8%. While for 2019 as a whole, they are forecast to be 1.1% and 1.7% respectively, down from 1.3% and 1.8%, while the unemployment rate to be 2.2% at year-end, slightly higher than in the previous survey.
Singapore's top esports athletes have received a boost ahead of their first SEA Games in December. Singtel announced today its sponsorship of the esports team as the sport gets ready to make its Games debut as a medal event in the Philippines. The sponsorship will include training and competition funds, player allowances, as well as scholarships. At the launch events today, Singtel also appointed 3 new brand ambassadors for its esports arm PVP. 2 new amateur leagues targeted at tertiary students and working professionals were also announced. Senior Minister of State for Education, Chee Hong Tat, said the economy can tap into the growth of the sport.
Esports is not just a lot of fun, it's actually serious business. From esports, we can grow whole industry cluster around it. So it's not only for young people, but it's for workers across different industries and across all age groups.
Elsewhere in Singapore, Westwood Primary School's special room maker space at Westwood helps students, especially those from lower income families, gain access to resources that they would otherwise not have. President Halimah Yacob visited Westwood Primary School today as part of her visits to engage communities. Makerspace at Westwood is a space where students can use the recycled materials available to create their own projects or embark on maker challenges. Madam Halimah's visit also coincides with Westwood Primary's annual Thrive Fiesta, where she saw how the pupils learn through play at the various game booths. And more news to come on News 5. I'll see you in a bit.
Weather report brought to you by Mitsubishi Electric.